There are two sorts of interview. There's the interview that gives us information, and there's the interview which is designed to ridicule and embarrass the person who is being asked the questions. And we've seen two interviews in the last 12 hours that follow the latter formula. One interview with Rees-Mogg and one interview with Isabel Oakeshott. Oakeshott, I'm sure, thinks that she got the better of Cathy Newman, and I suspect Rees-Mogg thinks that he pretty well survived the Channel 4 interview. But both of them are wrong. Rees-Mogg barely managed to scrape through by answering the questions. It was like looking at somebody in the middle of a particularly second-rate A-level exam. He might have got a C. But that's not what we expect from a leading member of the Conservative Party, and I'm sure it's not what Boris would expect from somebody who he expects to have his back. I wouldn't fancy my chances if the only people that I can wheel out to have my back are Nadine Dorries and Rees-Mogg. But there we are. As for Isabel Oakeshott, oh my goodness. Well, Isabel Oakeshott was being interviewed by the Times Radio and by a lady called Cathy Newman, who really is very good. Cathy Newman is excellent. And Oakeshott was not having any of it. Oakeshott was being asked, why did you give your WhatsApp story to the Telegraph and not to the Sunday Times, which would have been a much more suitable organ for disseminating the story. Well, Isabel wasn't prepared to go along with this, and they got into a sort of slanging match. I think it's the only way to describe it. It was really quite shocking. And at the end of it, Oakeshott said, "I'm going to terminate the interview. This is my last warning, okay?" And then she did. She accused Newman of being unprofessional because she was asking how much she was paid. And meanwhile, I think Isabel Oakeshott was asking Newman how much she was being paid. "I haven't hit the headlines. You've hit the headlines, Isabel," said Newman. "Well, maybe if you broke some stories, you would hit the headlines," said Oakeshott. I mean, it was an extraordinary clash. A personality clash would be the most charming way one could describe it. "I'm not going down that route, Cathy," said Oakeshott. "I think people are more interested in what the investigation reveals rather than how much I'm paid for doing my work as a journalist, for being..." Well, what is her journalism? Well, you know, she started off, she's been through a variety of newspapers, and in 2006 to 2014, I think, she was the political editor of the Sunday Times, and she received the Political Journalist of the Year during that time. But she says, it's so exciting, so exciting. You know, if you want to flounce off a TV program or a radio show or whatever this is called, I don't really know what Times Radio is because it produces a visual as well as an oral experience. So, is it a radio show or is it some sort of TV event or social media event? I can no longer tell the difference. Same thing with LBC. What is it? And you know, if you want to do a media event and you want to flounce off in the middle of it, you know, that is going to cause a sensation, I suppose, particularly if the show hasn't got somebody else lined up to take your place. But it's very difficult to have the last word, or at least it used to be. And until the invention of Twitter. And Isabel Oakeshott has gone back on Twitter to say, well, the reason I didn't sell my story to the Times or give my story to the Times is because, first of all, she says they've never asked me to write anything for them. And secondly, when she was dealing with another story, the Times saw fit to splash her private life with Richard Tice all over its pages. This really hurt. Especially as she was political editor especially as she had been political editor of the Sunday Times. And in 2021, for about a year, she was on GB News. Well, she would be. and now she's on Talk TV, where she's the international editor since April 2022. And, this, all I can suggest is this was a very testy interview, but she has certainly found that if you have a touch of l'esprit d'escalier, and you come out of your meeting and you suddenly, oh, I wish I'd said that. Well, you can now. You just go onto Twitter and you say what you should have said in the first place. And there we are. This is the lady who is so keen with tittle-tattle about other people. This is a lady who published the book Call Me Dave, and in its pages is the exciting story about Dave Cameron's interview with a pig's head, and yet Isabel Oakeshott doesn't like it when it's done to her. Well, I think if you can't take it, you shouldn't be dishing it out. It's as simple as that. And this little moment of pique, as I say, it seems to be paralleled by Rees Mogg's moment of well, I've called it a car crash interview. It's not quite in the car crash interview that you would find if you were looking at Nadine Dorries or at some of the other extraordinary car crash interviews. But as for when you get a Rees Mogg interview, you expect a certain quality, you expect a certain use of language and competence and preparation. There seemed to be none of that. Indeed, at the end of the interview, it descended into a sort of pompous use of phrases which I think people discovered in the 1960s and bandied around as if there was something new. Terminological inexactitude. What rubbish, pompous rubbish. And pomposity doesn't really mask a lack of preparation, does it? It's just laughable and weak. And that, I'm afraid, is how Isabel Oakeshott comes across as well. Laughable and weak. I think after that demonstration by both of them, I wouldn't give them the time of day.